Chapter 19. Feeling the steps through the soles of his feet, Andorn followed Bernard, the main servant in the house, as he led the way up the servants' stairs and then out onto the second floor of the house. Already the night had been taxing, more on the others than him. They weren't used to sneaking around in the same way that he was, but they were almost done. After almost a week of looking for the culprit to the town's little problem, they were reaching the end. They were about to apprehend the man, and likely more of the men who worked for him. Bernard continued down the hallway, his feet moving silent, knowing where to stand and where not to in order to avoid the creaks. They wound through the house, past rooms Andorn would have been forced to check, until the servant stopped and raised a hand to make sure Andorn did the same. Andorn watched. Bernard got down onto his knees and looked back and forth until he found what he was looking for, a small tripwire. Blinking, more than a little in shock that a person would do this with servants in the house, Andorn helped Bernard disarm the trap, stopping a nasty-looking mace from swinging out of a cupboard at one of his group. Instead, Bernard took the mace in hand and led them to a small door tucked in the back of the house. Would the mayor's aide really be here, plotting the downfall of his own town? It almost boggled the mind, but people did strange things, and sometimes another force was at work, making them do even stranger things. They were about to find out which. Opening the door without hesitating, Bernard strode through. Andorn was given little choice but to follow. A small study lined with books lay before him, but there was no sign of anyone else. This didn't seem to bother Bernard, although Yarlin looked around as if he was equally as confused as Andorn had been. Millie chuckled from somewhere behind them, clearly having expected some kind of similar reaction. Still, the servant didn't hesitate, going around the desk to a bookcase and a small seat and lamp built into the wall. Not sure what else to do, Andorn moved closer and looked for signs of some kind of secret. On the side of the bookcase, near where the lamp was fixed, was a pattern carved into the wood. Bernard reached for the center of a small flower and pressed it in. Immediately something clunked, and the bookcase swung outwards. As she'd done on many occasions, Saria stepped up to the opening, her bow at the ready and her wolf at her side. But whoever was on the other side of the door, momentarily out of Andorn's sight, they seemed to anticipate the intrusion, and a dart came flying out, catching her in the shoulder before she could dodge. She grunted, and Ulfer went mental, letting out an aggressive growl and running headlong into danger. Yarlin went with him, Mira yelling as Saria tried to focus, aimed, and let off her arrow anyway. Not intending to be left out of the fight, Andorn ran into the revealed room, spotting the 3 men in plain sight and the 4th trying to hide near the back.
"Ulfer," he called, "to me!"
"Go, Ulfa," Saria's voice came, stronger than it had been before. Her wolf obeyed her reassurance and rushed to Andorn's side, veering off the previous path in time to avoid a dart of his own. Yarlin quickly engaged with the nearest fighter, swinging his sword, and somewhere Andorn heard the thrum of a crossbow bolt as it flew through the air. Still feeling faster and lighter from Thorgrim's chant earlier in the evening, Andorn threw one of his daggers on approach at the man in robes in the corner. He yelped as it got him in the shoulder and broke off the string of words he had been mumbling to himself. Pulling his rapier out again, Andorn rushed the man, and Ulfr snarled and snapped at the wizard's ankles. The wolf soon got a good grip on an ankle and started dragging the man around, growling as he did. It took all of Andorn's concentration not to laugh, amused at how easily the spellcaster was bested. I thought wizards were powerful, Andorn thought. But his amusement was short-lived. The magic user reached forward and, uttering one word, zapped the poor wolf with some kind of electricity. It yelped and leapt back. Andorn took advantage of the distracted behavior, however, and thumped the guy as hard as he could, catching him full in the face and knocking him out in one go. With the most unpredictable person in the room taken care of, Andorn turned back to the chaos that the others were causing. Yarlin was still parrying and giving sword blows with a middle-aged fighter of some kind, dressed in plate mail and far too well defended for Andorn. Beside him was the butler, and this was the person who had been firing the darts. More lay in a line up the back of the man's jacket, and he reached for one, clearly looking at Saria as she tried to get a good shot with her bow, and the servant tried to distract him without getting hurt. Mira and Thorgrim were focused on the other person in the room, what appeared to be another ranger of sorts, but they were cautious and didn't fully engage. Despite their best attempts to prevent him from escaping, the man snuck past them and ran from the room. Mira went to follow, but Thorgrim didn't, turning back to the fray before them. Andorn considered going after the runaway too, but instead, he merely hurried to block the way out himself, catching Mira as he did. "Not worth it," he said to Mira to try and get her to refocus. "We've got the important one." She snarled her dragon-born nose at him, and for a moment a small puff of fire came out. But then she turned back, heeding his advice. The butler was still trying to fire darts, but he was now so completely outnumbered that it became clear he was wasting his time. As soon as he got a clear view to one person, another attacked him and made him have to dodge in some way. "Give up," Andorn said. "You can't win, either of you." The fighter hesitated, clearly considering dropping his weapon, letting it go wide. Yarlin had enough composure to stay his next attack, merely preparing to defend himself if the younger of the two opponents changed his mind yet again. Before anyone else could react, Traylon grabbed the sword, wrenching it from the fighter's grasp. The man turned, only to be impaled on his own sword.
"I won't have the faithless interrupt my plans,"
the butler yelled as the fighter died. None of them hesitated, all swinging in for the attack, even Saria, reaching for her short sword. "Give up," Andorn yelled. "Face justice."
"You don't understand. You're so insignificant. This is so much."
Traylon swung the sword, catching Yarlin in a parry. At the same time, Bernard swung his mace. It impacted the butler's body so hard that it lifted off the floor and flew several feet to the side. He hit the wall with a sickening thud and then crumpled to the floor like a limp ragdoll. Everyone suddenly stopped moving, most panting. Had they done it? Was he dead? Andorn reached down and felt for the man's pulse, trying not to look at the damage done to the man's body as he did. There wasn't a sign of breathing or a heartbeat. It was a senseless waste of life, only made worse by the fighter who had been killed for daring to understand he was beaten. Andorn sighed. They'd killed so many men in the last week, so very many. But at least a few were still alive, Andorn thought, remembering the two prisoners back at the hut in the forest. And they'd liberated Bernard and Millie. But there was still a little more work to do. They needed more proof. The staff would be helpful, but they needed something more concrete. Someone who would get the aide confirmed as a traitor to the town and not just unhinged enough to cut his servant's tongue out. While the others cleared up and moved the bodies out of the way, Andorn went over to the desk drawers and began to rummage. There were all sorts of things there, but he needed the right kind of letter. "This help?" Bernard asked a moment later, holding up a sheet of paper. Holding out his hand for it, Andorn moved closer to take a look. The letter was only partially written, looking to be what they had interrupted. It spoke of plans to find the flame, of the mayor suspecting something was wrong, but not what. There was even a mention of him and his friends, the band of pathetic but somehow lucky heroes the town adored. It made Andorn feel happier than he had in a long time to have people others knew were friends. But he was also concerned. This was written as if it was informing another of what was going on. But who? "This should do it," Andorn said, not wanting to draw the servant's attention to his worries. "As long as we have something official with matching handwriting."
Oh, not a problem. He was always writing letters on behalf of the mayor.
Bernard beckoned Andorn back into the small study on the other side of the moving bookshelf. The desk there held many more letters, these ones all normal butler and aide business. By the time Andorn had gathered his evidence, Thorgrim had finished healing everyone and doing things like removing darts and arrows from wounds.
I'll deal with the bodies. No doubt the mayor will want to decide what to do with him,
Bernard said when they were all standing around. We should take all this to him and tell him what happened. Will you be all right here? Andorn asked. The servant sighed and nodded, looking at the mess for a moment. Mira went to him, the others hanging back as if they sensed they would get in the way this time. If there's anything you can give us or tell us about your sister, I'll come back for it in the morning, she said, putting a hand over her heart. And I won't rest until we know where she is and can either give you peace or bring her back.
Well, that's a bold promise to make, young one,
Bernard replied.
Perhaps, but I know what it's like to lose a loved one or two and not know where they are, or even be sure if they're truly gone or not. It doesn't let you move on the way it does a clean, obvious death. I don't know how long it might take, but if there's anything to be learned, I'll learn it.
He nodded and then bowed to her, everyone seemingly more emotional. Knowing this was where meetings like this were meant to end, so no one embarrassed themselves too much, Andorn led the party out of the house, not shying away from using the main staircase and going out of the front door. For a moment, he paused on the snowy street, wanting to feel like nothing had just happened, but it had. At the mayor's house, Thorgrim took over, knocking, demanding they see the man himself, and then taking it on his shoulders to explain the events of the last few days, leaving out mentions of the flame and actually finding it. When Thorgrim first mentioned to the mayor that it had been his own aide, the man didn't appear to believe him, scoffing at the suggestion. But as they told more of the story, some of the others chipping in now and then and producing more evidence, and then finally, the last letter, the mayor frowned, and then he sank into his own chair. It was clear the mayor hadn't known a single thing about what his butler was up to. He sat staring at the final letter for more than a little while. Eventually, Andorn coughed. This brought the mayor out of his shock.
I must admit, when you first came to me, I wasn't sure about such a ragtag bunch of adventurers being able to help. You've proved that you not only had what it took to solve the problem, but you've done so as discreetly as you could. You have my eternal gratitude, and will always be welcome here.
Andorn and the others thanked the mayor as he got them the rest of their pay and encouraged them to have something to eat and rest before they decided to do anything else. At first he expected the others to refuse, but post-battle weariness had crept over them all. Not one of them objected. Sleep. Sleep would help put all the ugliness behind them. As Andorn slipped into his own room at the inn, he felt a small pang, however. He wasn't sure he wanted to just move on. Not this time.